Chapter 7. A Place So Dangerous. First person, Susan. I sense water, stones, a current pushing against my ankles, a rough tongue licking the hand resting against a rock. Then a purr, and I know who it is. I raise my face out of the water. A one-eyed cat is watching me from the dry part of the rock. "You in my mind?" I ask the cat. Semical, the one-eyed cat, is a cat from my own imagination. I wrote a story called How the One-Eyed Cat Saved the Unicorns. "Are you real?" I say. The one-eyed cat just yawns. I'd expected after meeting a talking bird and a 6-foot worm that everything here talked. "You're just a cat. That's odd." The trees near the edge of the stream begin to shake and part. I hear cries, then awful groans, and look for a stick to protect myself. I pick up an old branch and spread my feet, ready to face the unknown monster coming out of the woods. A meow comes from behind me. Semical has one paw on a greener piece of branch. I toss my bleached white one aside and it splinters on the rocks. Thanks. I hope whatever's coming is scared of branches. The grunts and screeches grow louder. Then the thing bursts from the woods. A terrible look on its face. It rushes straight into the stream without stopping and climbs up our bank. When it sees the branch, it shrieks in fear. Then it sees my cat and shrieks again. In a panic, the creature loses its balance and, arms flailing, slowly falls backwards into the water. I thrust my branch beneath the surface. 2 small hands grasp it, and I pull. The head bursts out of the water, spluttering, halfway through a sentence. But, hello, bookworm, I say. "Stick, cat," it stammers. The cat is harmless. "Bird you should watch out for," I say. "They eat worms." I pulled the funny worm up onto the rocks. "What are you doing crashing around in the forest?" "Delivering a message, and once I've delivered it, I shall be gone." "Why?" "Because you have come to a place so dangerous." It paused and shuffled closer. "We don't talk about it." The worm sat on a fallen log and crossed its little brown arms. "Well, what's the message?" We don't talk about it," he repeated. I thought I heard Semical, the cat, sigh, if that were possible. "Then how will I know what's in the message?" The bookworm smiled. I see your point. A proper catch-22. "Catch-22, I said, knowing full well the bookworm wouldn't miss a chance to explain all. Indeed, the bookworm rose and stood on the log. He cleared his throat and began. "A catch-22 is when 2 different rules negate the other. Example, you have to have money to make money, or the only way to borrow money from the bank is to convince them you don't need to borrow money from them." Or in this case, "If you don't leave, we're going to poison our only water source." Did you notice I used the term "our"? Water? Who poisoned the water? And why? And what does it have to do with my travelling down the river? Because if the lake, that is, the place we call the place so dangerous, isn't fixed, then it will infect this river and every other drop of water in the afterlife. The worm crouched with its arms out pleading. "You won't be able to travel to the living world anymore." "Does Professor Fantaylor know about this, or are you just causing trouble?" The worm spurted, coughed, and choked with indignation, I imagined. "Causing? Well, really, no, it was Professor Fantaylor that sent me." Tell Susan, it's all up to her," she said. "Me? What can I do?" "Right. That's why you're here, isn't it? So if the skill you have is writing, fix the problem with that, Susan B. MacLeod. You have to write us out of this." Golda by Susan B. MacLeod. The people of the left lived happily with the people of the right for centuries. Although a lake divided their villages, they both fished it, both drew water from it, and both enjoyed its natural beauty. But once in every 100 years, a harsh, biting wind would come to the lake, and this particular year it bit very hard. Babies died in their mother's arms, and the wood was so frozen it had to be heated before it could be burnt. And of course that was impossible, unless you kept the fire going day and night. For a while, most did, but then by gusts or tiredness or devils, the fire went out, one by one, until there was only one fire left, and it burned in the house of Mayor Golda Glass, the mayor of the right. All the villagers came to that last fire to dry their wood, and if they could, take a small ember with them to start their own fires again. For a while, the mayor let all do this, but then Golda noticed her own fire growing smaller and smaller, so that sometimes she turned her second best hearing ear to the door. As the villagers began their third night of queuing outside her door with their frozen branches, or legs of stools and tables to burn, the mayor's fire mysteriously went out. Mysteriously, for no ill wind had blown into that room, and 3 servants had watched it all night, and never closed their eyes, not once. In the middle of the queue of desperate villagers was an old crone with more than branches on her shoulders. She pointed a frozen twig towards the other side of the lake. "They did it," she cried. "They put out all our fires." All the people turned and looked across the lake. In the grey mist they could see dozens of fires glowing in the houses of the people of the left. Then, despite the protests of young Mayor Golda Glass, the branches for burning became branches and closed fists. The hungry and desperate mob crossed the white frozen lake. None of them knew what they would do when they reached the other side, but they hoped more blood from the left would stain the snow than theirs, and they hoped fire would return to the right side of the lake. But in their fury, the clouded minds, they forgot the rules of old, of generation passed to generation, to never cross with more than 10 at a time. So, with a crack heard only by those right on top of it, and in an instant of a blink, the 100 were gone. Gone down, gone fast, gone cold beneath the lake, their empty eyes and open mouths inviting the river to become them, and all of them drifted like children's drawings to the source of the river at the south end of the lake. None returned, and no word ever came to the right side of their fate. So they imagined the worst: murder, ambush, cruelty, a hideous plan against them, a plan that must have been years in the making. Still, Mayor Golda held her people's rage back for one more day. She promised that she herself would cross the lake and either bring back fire or news of the 100. Hitching the lightest horse in the village and climbing into her sleigh, she took nothing with her but a flask of hot tea and a white flag of truce. Her fur-lined hood flew off in the breeze, revealing her long blonde hair and round red cheeks. She flicked the reins, and the little horse with wrapped hooves and sleigh sped on towards the distant lights. The crack in the middle of the lake had frozen back over, leaving no trace or truth to find. So she passed over the frozen bodies beneath, without a blink. Her red sleigh leapt from the lake and landed just inside the woods of the village of the left. Then a low branch, forgotten by the tree cutters that kept the road clear, took her from her seat, and she saw no light until she awoke in a comfortable chair by a large glowing fireplace. For 3 days her people waited for her to return. Then they saw a dark figure struggling back across the ice. As she grew closer in the dim light of dusk, they saw that she was carrying fire, for smoke arose wherever she went. A cheer erupted from the crowd on the shoreline. "Fire! Golda brings fire!" Then they saw the figure collapse. The people ran out onto the lake, arms pumping, breath visible in the cold air, but they slowed almost as one as they saw the real cause of the smoke. Golda, their beautiful mare, was not wearing the clothes she had left with, but had been wrapped tightly in bandages, soaked in oil and set on fire. The people of the left had given their fire only in a message. Without hesitation, the people piled snow on top of their beloved Golda, and the fire went out, saving Golda but dooming them all to a cold winter's end. No fire would now burn on the left side until the thaw. Many would die. Those kneeling close heard Golda's message before she slipped into unconsciousness. Build a great water tower next to the lake, a tower so great that it might take 3 days to fill. But Golda, said her wisest councilman, we have no fire left to melt the snow to make such water. Not water, she whispered through her cracked lips. Poison. The other side of the lake. Watch them, day and night. Why? Asked the old councilman. Because they will build their own tower of poison, and they will watch us, and if we ever try to cross the lake again, they will empty their poison into the lake. So the mayor of the left told me, just before she set the match to me. Then Golda closed her eyes, and when she awoke, neither her beautiful skin nor her beautiful mind were the same. But, said the councilman, his mind struggling with all she had told him, we share the same lake. But her ears could no longer hear, and fear could no longer reason. Bookworm groaned and slapped his palm against his rubbery forehead. So depressing. You don't like it, I frowned. Not the point at all, you silly girl. The story must solve the problem, you see. You must write an epitaph, and hurry. I can smell the foul water. The worm close-faced me again. It seemed to be its favourite move. It will soon be here. But, I stammered, I don't know how to solve it. Oh, for goodness sake, said the worm, and without word or warning, he threw me in the river. When I surfaced, I was no longer in the stream, but treading water in a great lake ringed by dark beech trees. I immediately knew where I was, in my own story. On each side of the lake was a tall wooden water tower ringed with strong iron and standing on great legs of beech trunks. Each had a chute that lowered over the water, and each chute a red rope that was fenced off and guarded. Which side to swim to, I wondered, left or right, but before I could decide I saw a tall woman with golden hair standing in a small flat-bottomed boat. She held a long pole and pushed the craft along like the gondolas of Venice. Only her eyes were visible from beneath the folds of cloth she wore. In those eyes were all kinds of fire and all the sorrows of the cold. It was Golda, there was no doubt, for even though it was warm and the snow had melted, she kept most of her skin covered, so that the burns beneath could only be imagined. The agreement is, no one crosses the lake, she said. I haven't crossed, I said. I fell. Then I pointed to the sky. Golda frowned. You don't look like a bird, she frowned. Then her eyes seemed to smile, yet the sadness never left them. I wish we were birds. They cross all the time. Birds from the left who make nests in our trees and ours in theirs. She reached down a hand and pulled me into the boat. Come, you will explain all, but dry. In my mind, the little village by the lake that I had created, even though suffering a harsh winter, was strong. Older children looked after the wee ones, and people knew all their neighbours. But the town of the right was now a gloomy place. I saw a man staring blindly across the lake, scratching his arm till it was red raw. Another swayed back and forth with her head in her hands, and people passed without greeting each other. People seemed disheartened, I observed. Then we passed into the shadow of the great tower of poison, and Golda stopped. We have survived from this bountiful lake for centuries, but now the people across the lake fear us and we fear them. She pointed across the mile of water to an identical tower on the far side. We all, including them, live in the shadow of death. Then the writer inside me knew I just couldn't wave my pencil in the air and make it all better. I would have to live here, to feel the cold and rawness of breath. She took me to her house and gave me dry clothes, so that I looked just like another villager. She fed me and then sat across from me waiting to ask the obvious question, and I thought it a wonderful and terrifying thing to be inside one's own story, to know certain things, yet not to have control, not of all things. And I, being a writer, I knew what she would ask and how I would answer. And it could only be with another story. Where did you come from? Golda said. Certainly not from the air. No, not from the air. From the lake. Bottom of the lake. Go on, she said, intrigued. I was dead, drowned, I began. But the water didn't want me. It released me back to this life. So I floated up from the bottom of the lake to where you found me. The untrue part of the story. And how did you come to drown? She asked. Because I overcame my fear for others. The true part of the story. Yesterday, I and some of my companions were to climb down a steep cliff, a gorge actually, and then follow a fast-running river downstream. They argued all morning that they didn't want to go on this journey, that they would rather stay in our cabin and play cards. But I knew it would be something they regretted, that they would miss the opportunity to learn something about each other by not climbing down that rope. They knew full well that I was the one frightened of both heights and water, that if anyone should behave like a coward and not go on this adventure, it would be me. So I announced that even though I was terrified, I would go first down the rope, and that I would be first to climb out from the river at the end. So they came. How could they not? They're both older than me by 6 months. And you nearly died because of this act of bravery? Yes, I nearly died. But as you can see, here I am. You made an act of self-sacrifice. You risked all for the good of others. She turned to me. I hope they know each other better now. So do I said. Then she led me outside and helped me climb into a newly built red sleigh pulled by a new white horse. Take this sleigh, find your friends. If they are true friends, they will be searching the shores for you. The horse knows the way home. Thank you, I said. Taking the reins, I added, what will you do about the towers? She sighed and said, I will pray about it. For various reasons, all having their birth in fear, we did not pray about it before we decided to build it. Then I flicked the reins and the horse and the sleigh slid off across the soft grass as smoothly as if it was snow. If I were just an ordinary character in the story, I would not know what happened next to Golda, but as the writer I can tell you. Golda watched the sleigh with the strange girl curve around the edge of the lake, then vanish into the beech trees. The girl's story of showing the others the way was still in her head. She walked to the Tower of Poison and looked up at it. Then she looked across the tower on the other side of the lake. The wise councilman came up to her, for he could see that something was on her mind. Jeremiah, she said, how long did it take to fill the tank with poison? Well, Mayor, it took 3 full days. And how long would it take to empty it? His brow furrowed as he said, into the lake, my lady. No, not the lake, smiled Golda. And that is where the story ends, with the wise councilman counting on his fingers the days it would take to empty the deadly tower. I didn't need to be told. I knew how to get back. Once I was out of sight of the village of the right, surely they would rename themselves, or I would. I stopped the horse and, taking a deep breath, walked into the lake. I swam down, then up, and rose out of the water to see the worm still jumping up and down on the river's edge. What now? I said, water still dripping from me. But what happened? You left an old man counting his fingers. Did they empty it? Did they tear it down? And if they did, what did the other side do? Did they take down their tower, or did they attack? Well, worm, that's for you to decide. I don't want to decide. I want to be told, to know, to know, to know. Are you doing your own echo now? The worm threw himself down in a dramatic fed up with it all pose. Semical the cat jumped out of the way with a disapproving meow. Anyway, tell me, did I solve the problem of the water with my story? Only way to know that is to drink from the river. I don't care, complained the worm, one little arm attempting to conceal its mock-suffering face. I knelt by the stream and cupped my hands, then tasted my own story.